So let's get going. I just have a few club announcements for those of you who are here. We are going to have another September meeting to meet with two other district attorney candidates. That's going to be, I'm sorry, I don't have this written down. I think it's September 20th. I'm sorry, let me check before I say it out loud. Yeah, September 23rd. We also, I want you guys to keep in mind, coming up in October, we have a meeting on Tuesday the 13th. We'll be hearing from our last district attorney candidate on that night. We'll also be meeting with the candidate for Manhattan Borough President, and we're going to be having our club officer elections that night. So that's for President, Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer. If anybody wants to run for those offices, please let me know or get in touch with me if you've got questions about what that stuff means. There is at least one of those officers who is not running for re-election. So there's at least one seat that's completely open, and others that are kind of up for discussion or up for contest, depending on whether you think Grand Street Dems has been addressing the issues that you think we should be addressing. If there's more that you think you would like to see us doing, I would love to see you actually individually get involved and help steer the club in that direction.
So you said Manhattan Borough President, how many candidates are there for that? That seems like a very busy meeting.
That is going to be a busy meeting. So we're going to have 2 candidate interviews that night and have officer elections. Yeah.
And DA, the last DA person. You said a DA
we'll
plus President plus officers.
That's right. Yeah. So that meeting might last more like an hour and a half rather than an hour.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to try to start squeezing in some more of these meetings so that we can also individually meet with our city council candidates for District 1. I wish I could only take up your time once a month, but the next couple of months are going to be a little bit busy. Obviously, the 2021 elections are very important locally, and all of that stuff from our end has to be decided. We have to have endorsements in February because that's when petitioning begins. So there's a condensed period of time here for us to take care of this business. The other thing I want to remind everybody about is that we have started a weekly phone bank for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on Mondays at 5 o'clock. If you go to grandstreetdems.nyc/Biden-Harris, and I'll put that in the chat, that will send you to a mobilize page that allows you to sign up for 1 or 2 or all of those Mondays. I think we've got 9 weeks left before the election. If Monday at 5 o'clock is not a good time for you, there are lots of other organizations that are sponsoring phone banks each night of the week, and I encourage you to just pick another group and join them and start making these calls. It involves, a laptop and a phone. Some of the technology is a little funky to get through, but you'll get through it. We've been primarily calling voters who are already in some shape or form assumed to be a possible Democratic voter. So you're not talking to Red Hats, and you're not doing a lot of persuasion. You're really just making connections with voters, making sure they have a plan to vote. For the people who seem enthusiastic, asking them to volunteer to make calls just like you're doing. And I've had several really good, fun conversations with folks. I think I turned an undecided Republican into a Democratic voter in Florida, of all places, on Monday.
Hooray.
Really what's motivating me is the idea of sitting in front of the television on election night with bad results coming in and feeling as though I should have done more. I don't want to think I should have done more. I want to do whatever I can over the next 9 weeks. So I encourage you all to join that stuff. Check the emails that are going out from Grand Street Dems so you know where to sign up. And again, if you can't make Mondays, there are lots of other phone banks happening. Actually, once you get a hang of the system, you can log in all on your own anytime from noon to 11 p.m. any day of the week. It is a little bit more fun to do it with a group, but if that's not convenient for you, please please find your own time to do that. And I think that's all the announcements I've got. Carolyn or Lee, am I missing anything? No?
Well, just one quick thing. I've gotten several more requests from people who want to be poll workers. I
Oh,
thought there's
great.
been just a great boost in that. And yesterday was National Poll Worker Recruitment Day. If anyone is considering it, you know who just signed up to be a poll worker today? Ava DuVernay, okay? She signed up to be a poll worker in California. So again, just to remind people they're needed, and it's not too late to sign up. You know, tell your friends.
That's great, thank you.
And we're also looking for 17-year-olds. If you have a high schooler that has some free time because they won't be going to school, perhaps, get in touch.
What can the high schoolers do, Lee?
The Board of Elections will allow 17-year-olds to help out at polls.
They can work as official poll workers if they're 17 and in high school. They are allowed to be poll workers, and you know, we also always need interpreters, and so kids who are bilingual are especially encouraged in many languages in the city. They get high school credit for it, and with largely remote learning, even though election day is a school, you know, would be a day off, you know, you just have more flexibility because it is a long day, and you know, you start very early and you end pretty late, but you might not have to report to school the next morning. So, and you get paid for the training. Everyone, not just high schoolers, you get paid for the training, you get paid for the days you work, and there's also early voting. So, you know, it's an opportunity to just get involved at the really, really foundational level.
All right, that's great, thank you.
What I also did recruiting, and I tell people that really, if you love your country, you have a choice. Either you can go to Afghanistan or you can be a poll worker. What do you want to do? So it's
Those are the two choices.
It's a very patriotic thing, even though it seems boring in a way.
I appreciate that, thank you. All right, so let's get to our first guest this evening. Assemblymember Dan Quart is joining us. He's running for Manhattan DA. And we'll do this as we've done the others. Dan, you can just say hi and introduce yourself and let us know what is motivating your candidacy. And then we will we'll field some questions from the audience. And for everybody else, remember that means you can either do the little raise hand in Zoom and I'll see you, or you can make a note in the chat window and I'll call on you when we get there. So go for it, Dan.
Sure, Jeremy, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to so many people at the Grand Street Dems, and an opportunity to present again before you now as a candidate in full for District Attorney in Manhattan. My favorite book about the criminal legal system has very little to do with being an actual lawyer. Jill Loeb, who was an LA Times reporter, wrote a seminal book several years ago called Ghetto Side, about the criminal legal system in South Central Los Angeles in the mid-2000s, ironically when Bill Bratton was police commissioner there. For one thing that I think that people should know, or that I always found compelling, is that the mortality rate for Black men in South Central Los Angeles at that time was higher than Marines fighting in Fallujah at that same time. Jill Loeb wrote something very seminal that I always took from that book about law enforcement and the prosecution of those who were indicted and went to trial. And it was that the law is a bully against that which is easy and a coward against that which is hard. Unfortunately, nothing sums up better the last 11 years of Cy Vance as district attorney in Manhattan than that phrase. A bully against that which is easy, and an unwillingness to take on and fight against that which is hard. I'm running for district attorney not to do the small things, not to be a kinder, gentler, different type of prosecutor. I'm running to completely deconstruct and rebuild this office into something much different. A vessel for reform, something that means something to Manhattanites, which it doesn't mean today. And I'll do that in three very specific ways. First, through a complete revamping of the sex crimes unit within the office. Harvey Weinstein only being the most glaring example of a deeply flawed and systemically failed sex crimes unit within the office. I'm proud of the fact that I'm the only candidate in this race who's put forth a 9-point plan on exactly how I would revamp that unit. And I'll share it in the chat right now. Secondly, Vance uses technology to spy on communities of color. Let me say that again. Vance uses technology through the use of so-called gang database technology to spy against communities of color, people in the Reese houses or in Baruch houses, people in Washington Heights where I grew up, or in Central Harlem. I have spoken out against this. I've written op-eds against this, and I will deconstruct these spying techniques because for one very simple reason. You cannot be a credible messenger for reform of our criminal legal system with the left hand and with the right hand be profiling communities of color. It doesn't work that way. I will be public, even though the wrong was not done in my name. I will be public about this mistake and this constitutional abridgment, and I will eliminate it throughout Manhattan. And last but not least, the things I'm most synonymous with in Albany, ending all sorts of policies that punish poor people without public safety benefit. From our bail system to work tools mischaracterized as knives, to stopping so many of the broken windows policing policies that have extended into our courtroom. I will continue my work in Albany, but I will do it on a much different scale in the courtroom through 560 assistant district attorneys and a $100 million budget. And I look forward in the course of the next 15, 20 minutes in discussing the specifics on exactly how I would do that.
Thanks, Dan. I'll go ahead and take the first question till I start
Sure.
seeing some hands. And I wonder actually if you could expand a little bit on that last point. You've taken legislative action, and I think the focus of a lot of street protests over the last few months have been about police action. But what specifically? How do you change the prosecutor's role in order to reform police behavior and make New York safer for, as you say, underprivileged and poor residents?
You start by prosecuting police officers who engage in violence through excessive force. And it seems like a simple concept, but it isn't. In the last 11 years under Vance's role as district attorney, I think he's prosecuted maybe 3 or 4 police officers, but it's only for filing a false instrument. It's never for engaging in excessive force or violence. And I'll give you one example that I think is very specific to Lower Manhattan in the Grand Street area. I was down with Assembly Member Harvey Epstein, and I think Carlina Rivera was there as well, where we were protesting PSA 4 on East 9th Street because of a specific instance involving Officer Garcia, who put his knee on an individual's lower upper back and neck for 12 to 15 seconds. Dermot Shea put that officer on modified desk duty. If I was Manhattan District Attorney, I would have indicted and prosecuted Officer Garcia. It sounds simple, it should be simple, but you start where you want to end up. I will prosecute officers who engage in violence against members of the public in Manhattan. Secondly, there is a significant problem, and I've pushed Vance on this, and I'm glad of my efforts to force him to publish his list of police officers who are untruthful. It's called test-a-lying. It's a significant problem, but it's not enough to just publish those officers who the office does not find trustworthy to go to trial, because those officers just go back to the precinct and likely continue the same sort of conduct that landed them on that list in the first place. I will be public about this. After all, this information is gathered by your tax dollars, by your district attorney's office. I'm proud of my efforts to make Vance publish and make public those lists of officers he doesn't believe are worthy of testifying in a courtroom. And last but not least, something very specific. The first point of instance where the district attorney's office deals with the NYPD and specific information coming to the office is ECAB, Early Case Assessment Bureau. That's where records contemporaneous with arrest go to. I will have a full redo and vetting of information by police officers because we can't rely on suppression hearings. And I want to know those officers at the first instance who are engaging in tactics that might be untoward, if not illegal, but most specifically, who are providing information pursuant to arrests that are inaccurate, misleading, or completely untruthful. We need to do all of these things. It starts with prosecuting, but it also means bending or changing the bureaucracy to ensure that we do not allow those patterns of untruthfulness by officers to go unattended to for years, if months, if not years.
And if I could just follow up a little bit on that, it sounds that my fear around what you're talking about is that there's an open conflict between the prosecutor's office and the police officers in this city. How do you expect to manage that as a personnel problem?
It certainly is true. That is the balance you must find between working with rank and file police officers at precincts all over Manhattan, who we must rely upon to make cases, especially because so many cases involve one witness arrest, and that one witness is typically the police officer. By and large, we will have a good working relationship with the local precincts and individual officers who are doing their job. But in no way, shape, or form will that prevent me from holding police officers who engage in violence against individuals, excessive force, who are untruthful on police forms or anything else from accountability. There will be some level of disagreement, if not outright conflict, with certain aspects of the political arm of the NYPD and obviously different aspects of media support of the NYPD. That is a fact of life. I think that makes me a little different than everybody else in this race in one respect is I've faced that criticism. I've accepted it. I've been criticized. The NYPD, the PBA, they have said disparaging things against me, but I have not changed my views on criminal legal system. And most importantly, I have held those views and actually had to earn the support of real voters to get reelected, elected through general election and primary. And I represent a district that is not the most diverse in Manhattan, but I have been fighting for reforms of the criminal legal system for all 9 years if I've been in office. And those views have been tested before actual voters. And I have stood firm in my views. So for those Manhattanites and Democrats who are really looking for someone who is going to reform this office, who is actually going to execute on the rhetoric he or she sets forth in this campaign, I would humbly suggest, at least for my record of 9 years, you're not going to have anything to worry about with me. I will follow through on the things that I'm promising you tonight and will promise throughout the campaign. And you know that because you can look in my record for 9 years of doing that.
Tommy, you've got your hand up.
Yep. First of all, thank you for the comment on Officer Garcia. It's 4 months. They took his gun, put him on desk duty. There's video, and it's really a mystery why it's taking this long. But that's not my question. Okay. People may not know, but the DAs have an enormous, I don't want to call it a slush fund, but forfeiture money. People may not realize that each DA gets to keep the forfeiture money that their county accumulates. And in the case of Manhattan, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are sitting in the DA's coffers that could be distributed through the community. The current DA has a process which apparently lacks total transparency, and he doles out the money to the people and to groups with no process, it appears, in place. And I'm wondering, have you thought about what to do with these? I think it's $600 or $700 million that are in the DA's account.
I have thought extensively about this. I have legislation about this. And let me just take 30 seconds on the history, because Cy Vance has monetized the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to enrich the office so he can use this money to give away to whichever community he deems necessary at that point. In 2009 and 2008, when all these banks brought such havoc on this country, and the SEC then fined these banks inordinate amounts of money, but that didn't immunize them from prosecution or their board shareholders or any of their board of director members. But Cy Vance chose not to prosecute any corporate shareholders from banks or other corporate institutions in 2009. Why? Because this pot existed. So what he did was he reached deferred prosecution agreements with many of these corporate entities. Instead of indicting them and letting jurors decide their fate, he chose to take their money in deferred prosecution agreement. And that's how he came up with such a big pot of money. At its height, I think it was $800 million. And I have legislation in Albany that would reform the process, that would change the way, and would remove to some extent the district attorney's office, because I have a basic belief that the DA's office is not the proper governmental entity to be giving out not-for-profit money. That being said, unless Cy Vance spends down every last dime of that money, there will be a significant amount of money in the office. And my goal is to have a complete revamp and change of how that forfeiture fund money is given out. I think, to Tom's point in his question, Vance has focused on giving the NYPD money for walkie-talkies and other things. I would not do that. He's also focused on giving money to the larger not-for-profits. I think that's a misfocused guidance. What I would do is look at the smaller not-for-profits who, because the application to seek this money is 70, 80, 90 pages, can never actually write a grant proposal where they're ever going to be competitive for that money. That freezes out so many smaller not-for-profits. I'm going to rely on the community, my colleagues in government and the community board, not to be the final determination of who's going to get some of this money, but at least to identify those smaller not-for-profits that are doing the important prisoner reentry work, that are doing the important work on domestic violence in the community, because that's who I want to give my money to. They'll have to go through an RFP process, but we're going to help them apply by simplifying the grant application process and giving them a fighting chance to secure that money, because I really believe smaller is better, and I want to give that opportunity for the smaller not-for-profits. And because I have a connection with the Grand Street community and people in Lower Manhattan, I think I'll be in a unique position to identify those not-for-profits that have been overlooked by government for funding for 11 years by this district attorney's office.
Thank you.
Thanks. Marion, you've got your hand up.
Sorry. Hi. Thank you. I really like a lot of what you say, and I love that you call it the criminal legal system and not the criminal justice system. That already tells me a lot about your philosophy. I have two questions, if I may. One is, will you accept money from the police unions?
No.
Okay, good. And the other is, as we know, police brutality and misconduct. And you talked a lot about prosecuting it, but I'm wondering if you can say examples of where district attorneys' offices have actually managed to enact policies that reduce that in different places, because this is all over the country, not just in New York City.
Well, the answer to your question is there are certain prosecutors across this country that are doing a better job on police accountability, but it does involve prosecution. And I would focus on Rachel Rollins in Boston, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. The real change on a police accountability, I think, comes through change of law in Albany and through the city council. And I think I look at that through an historical lens. We have spent so much money, your tax dollars, through the city budget over the last 12, 15 years on diversity training, implicit bias training, violence reduction training, and it has not been successful. It may have made the situation slightly less bad. The only thing that really works, in my view, or works to a greater degree than any of those things, is changes of law. And that is something I've been focused on in 9 years in Albany. It's not specific to what a district attorney can do, But I will say, and this has been asked at other forums, about whether I would join the District Attorneys Association, and I would not, because they are antithetical to everything I've been fighting for in Albany. And I think in that way, I could be different and play a different role than many of the other candidates in this race, because I do come from a legislative background. I understand how laws get changed and how they don't get changed, and how you can, at times, defeat the PBA. On police secrecy laws, we were able to do that. And I think in that way, I can have a unique and different relationship with the legislature than the other good lawyers running in this seat. But I think the answer to your question, the most empowering way we can change police conduct is changes of laws and rules at the city council level and at the state legislature level. I would love to say to you, it could all be done by the district attorney, but 9 years in Albany tells me different. That changes of law, making the chokehold ban, codifying that in actual law, as opposed to just being a couple words in the patrol guide, that will make a difference. And I think that'll make a difference in a way as important as the prosecution of excessive force by law enforcement.
May I ask one just quick follow-up on that?
Of course.
Will you as district attorney have any ability to facilitate the passage of those laws? And
Yes.
if not, who will you reach out to do it?
No, I certainly will. And I will be actively involved in legislation, and mostly I suspect as a counterweight to the District Attorneys Association. And just for the callers who may not understand, unfortunately, the District Attorneys Association is not a force for positive change in Albany. It's been an obstacle to any significant reform in my 9 years, and probably before that. A Manhattan district attorney who does not caucus with the other 61 district attorneys in this state can play a significant role as a counterweight in their opposition to legislative efforts. And I would play that. And, it's not something I'm going to put on a palm card and make a lot of hay over, that I'm going to run a government office, because I'm running for district attorney, not the chief legislator of criminal legal reform in the county or the state. But I will take my role seriously. And how can I not? 9 years in Albany, I have spent working on the details of language to change our criminal legal system. I would not stop, but I would not stop just because I'm the district attorney.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And I think our short 20 minutes are up, but Assembly member, thanks very much for joining us. We will be in touch about, as I said, about a larger forum for downtown Manhattan for all of the DA candidates. So look out for that invitation.
I will. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thanks a lot. And now we can move on to our second guest, Diana Florence. And first of all, let me apologize for spelling your name incorrectly on our website. I think it was right in other places, but as I explained to Brett, I do a lot of my club business after the family has gone to sleep and when I probably should also be asleep. And it's not the first time I've misspelled a candidate's name on our website. In any case, my apologies. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's more or less the same format. If you'd like to open by just telling us a little about yourself and why you're running, and then we'll hopefully be able to take a handful of questions.
Thanks so much, Jeremy, and no worries about the misspelling. I do speak Spanish, so I consider it an honor to be Flores instead of Florence. Thank you. So my name is Diana Florence, and I want to thank the Grand Street Dems and Jeremy and Brett for inviting me and letting me have an opportunity to get to introduce myself to all of you. Apologies, I'm a little nervous. I am a first-time candidate. I've addressed many juries, but Zoom is a new format for me, so bear with me, please. So just a little bit about me. I live about 30 blocks north of you. I live in Kips Bay. I'm married and I have 2 teenagers. Let me tell you a little bit about why I'm running for Manhattan DA. I've dedicated my life fighting for people who never thought they would win. People like Carlos Moncayo, an undocumented immigrant construction worker who one day went to work, did everything he was supposed to do, and was dead before lunch. Carlos died because corporate interests cared more about profit than his safety. I know because I'm the one who prosecuted his case and obtained landmark convictions against the corporations and executives who were responsible for his death. But Carlos's story is a tragedy, but not an anomaly. He represents every single one of us who believe that if we follow the rules, we're going to be okay. Now, that didn't happen for Carlos, and it doesn't happen for too many of us. I became a prosecutor to change that, to make sure that justice isn't reserved for only people that have the right skin color or live in the right zip code. When I was almost the exact same age as Carlos, I was a law student, and I worked in my school's criminal law clinic. Because I spoke Spanish, I was both interpreter and defense attorney for the day laborers that were our clients. And I saw how much power the prosecutor had to impact their lives. One decision could make the difference between derailing someone or putting them back on track. That ability to do right and to really make someone's life better is the reason I became a prosecutor. And I went to Robert Morgenthal's office upon graduation. And he taught me the responsibility and integrity of public service. So I started my career working alongside women and children who were survivors of unspeakable domestic violence. Together, we worked to ensure that their abusers face justice. After 9/11, I worked with the Red Cross, Safe Horizon, and the Robin Hood Foundation to go after con artists who stole hundreds of thousands of dollars that were earmarked for the victims of the terror attacks. And from there, as the city began to rebuild, I focused my efforts on public corruption. So I went after corporations and executives that cheated on the strength of the concrete tests at the World Trade Center, Yankee Stadium, 2nd Avenue Subway, and just many, many, many other buildings. I also went after contractors that ripped off NYCHA tenants near Grand Street all over the city by faking substantial apartment repairs. I focused my efforts on big corporations that threw away workers' lives, workers like Carlos, but also steal millions of dollars in wage theft. I did this by creating a community-based model of prosecution, and I brought unions and community leaders and advocates to the table. I got my cases by going to community board meetings and setting up a WhatsApp so that people could actually text me, people that would never imagine that the DA's office could be a resource. When I saw loopholes after doing cases that allowed corporations to steal millions from working people or only be fined $10,000 when they killed a worker, I teamed up with legislators like Catalina Cruz to change the law. I wrote the bills. My focus has always been going after crimes of power. But under DA Vance, that was not a shared vision. All you have to do is look at Weinstein, Epstein, and Trump. Imagine how different our world would look if he had taken the same approach I did to those cases. The common thread was a deference and an unwillingness to go after crimes of power. And that must change. It has to change for Black and brown New Yorkers who've been targeted and brutalized by police. It has to change for women and trans New Yorkers who've seen the DA's office as an obstacle rather than a place of opportunity. And it must change so that the powerful people who hire connected lawyers don't get a concierge system of justice while everyone else hopes that they'll be treated fairly. I've never forgotten who I'm fighting for. I've done the work. That's why I've been endorsed by 8 labor unions, because working people understand that I will always put people before power. I believe everyone deserves to be safe at home, safe at work, and safe on the street. And that's why I'm running for Manhattan DA. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I will probably take the first question again until I see some other hands up. You are a veteran of the DA's office, and I think now of the several candidates we've spoken with, the first although not the last, who's coming from inside that office to presumably make critiques and make changes. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit to well, you can frame it however you like. I assume you think it's a strength to have that kind of experience in that office and know exactly what's expected there. I presume there are some Democratic voters who've been out on the streets looking for a big change. How do you reconcile those things?
I think all you have to do is look at my record. The office is certainly broken, and it certainly has lost its way. There's no question of that. But if you look at the work that I've done groundbreaking wage theft cases, health and safety, going after corruption without fear or favor. That's the way forward, and I understand that. I fought against the entrenched policies over the last decade under DA Vance, and so I know exactly how to use the criminal law and how to change that office.
And does that you just spoke a lot about crimes of power, which I appreciate, and the names Weinstein and Epstein and Trump, and I saw an email from you today that also included the name Kushner. So I see where you're going with all of that. Again, there's a big push right now in the city and across the country for some much more pedestrian reforms of the kinds of behavior we see coming from police departments, in particular in neighborhoods, underprivileged neighborhoods. Have you had experience working in that realm? And if so, or if not, what ways would you use the power of the DA's office to actually reform police behavior?
Yes, so I have worked on both street level crimes and white collar crimes. So I definitely have extensive experience. But I think what you're really asking about is whether, I would hold police accountable because, do I understand how to do that? And I would say to you, absolutely. I think we have to sort of start out by saying, look, we all know that the current accountability framework isn't working. It's not effective. And if it were, we wouldn't have the countless incidents that we see. We've seen recordings of police officers beating up homeless people, and we've heard about them sexually abusing women and discharging weapons at protesters. This is unacceptable. And the way that it's been handled up until now is we said CCRB or IAB and a bunch of other acronyms. But those are crimes, and we haven't treated them as such. So it literally starts with treating them as crimes. But it's also, because I've done investigations, it's also about using the tools that we've been given. For example, 50A. We can proactively investigate. We can look at 50A and find the worst offenders and focus our efforts on those. That's the way forward. The DA's office has a role to play. We are the enforcers of the law, and the laws are there. We just have to choose to use them. And that's what I would do. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Nope, I did it to myself. Can you, since you've been there in that office, do you have any speculation or reason for why those things have been ignored? Why officers have not been prosecuted in that way?
I can't speculate. I can just tell you that it's about the vision from the top. And my vision has always been using my abilities and frankly, the power of the prosecutor to go after crimes of power. An example is Carlos's case that I mentioned to you. That case was a homicide. It started as his construction death, not too far from Grand Street, near the former site of Pastis. But when I was looking into it, right, it started out with just the construction level homicide. But I realized that the executives at the top end, they had a role in this too. It wasn't just the people on scene. And so just like Al Capone, we know he did lots of bad things, right? But he went down for tax evasion. Ultimately, what I did there was I investigated the companies for wage theft, tax fraud, insurance fraud. You have to take a holistic view. And it's about looking and using your innovative ways to hold the power accountable. With the police, all I can say is there are many ways to do this innovatively and proactively. They haven't done that. I can't say why. I can tell you what I would do.
Thanks. Keen, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I don't quite understand the sequence. You were with Morgenthal's office, and apparently you're not with Vance. Did you quit? Did they fire you? Are you still there by mistake? What happened? What's that sequence?
Sure. So I was there until this past January, and then I resigned. I resigned on my own volition because I was about to bring a case against major landlords, and the office pulled that. And when they took away the work, I resigned. Now, there was also a mistake that was made while the resources were taken away. And I learned about that and I addressed it and I own that. But I wasn't fired. I left of my own volition.
Thank you.
Tommy?
Yeah, you know, we're going to be faced with the choice of a lot of candidates who probably are not on policy that far from each other. Is there any one thing that you think differentiates yourself from the other candidates and makes you the right choice?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. You know, I have a 25-year record of fighting for working people, immigrants, and people, as I said, who never thought they'd win. It's not the normal profile of a prosecutor, and it's not the way you think of the criminal law, right? I mean, we all have that view that it's about oppressing Black and brown people. I turned it on its head. I worked for the people. I understand the interconnection between corruption and street crime. And when you address corruption, you go after those powerful people and you make them pay their fair share of taxes. You also then free up money so that we can address the social problems of street crime. So for example, someone who has an addiction or mental health issue, you know, right now we either we don't have the money or we're spending it elsewhere. Either way, if you go after corruption, you will be able to replenish those coffers and allow us to address those social problems the way they should be handled. So to me, my profile of spending my career going after corruption is unique, and it's also an innovative way of looking at things. And finally, I would say that it will rebuild trust in the government and our systems, because for too long, we've over-criminalized Black and brown people and let white privileged people go free. I fought about that my entire career, and I will do that when I'm elected district attorney.
Thanks. Have we got any other questions? Marion's got her actual hand up. Excellent.
A real hand. So Diana, I'm curious about, thank you for everything you talked about, and I wish we'd go after more corporations. Will you accept money from police unions?
No police unions, no
Donations?
law enforcement unions, no bail bondsmen, no real estate developers, and no corporations.
Okay, that's all good. Can I ask a second question?
Please.
Which is, what do you think are the most important things that the DA's office can do for holding police accountable for their behavior, much like you described, and holding corporations accountable? How are we going to hold the police department accountable for their misbehavior and violence in communities of color and poor communities?
Yeah, thank you. I would say it's about really making sure that we hold them to account. These are crimes of power. When police officers abuse their authority, they're doing it because they have not been held accountable. And I think until we hold police officers accountable, there's an expectation that there will be enforcement, you know, it's going to continue. In the construction industry, which is where you know, I spent most of my career, I enforced a lot of cases that were, you know, the defense would often be, well, everyone's doing it, or this fraud has been around for years. Why are you here now? That was especially true with wage theft. What do you mean this is criminal? Why isn't this civil? And, you know, sometimes it's just about bringing the cases and changing people's view. And so it would give pause to other companies and other executives that these behaviors that are no longer going to be tolerated. So my approach is literally going back to basics, using the laws we have. You know, with respect to the assemblyman, we have a lot of laws that we just don't enforce. The DA's job is to use those laws. I've done that in my career. I would absolutely do that to hold police officers accountable.
Thank you. May I ask one more follow-up, or is there someone else waiting?
I don't see another hand, so you can get the last question. Go for it.
So I'm just wondering what you've seen across the country from the DA's office in particular that has been effective at doing that, what you described.
Yeah, so what I would say is it's about what I can't specifically point to an office, but what I can tell you is it's a lot of the work that I did, which is going out into the community. What I learned when I went to community boards and when you know, unions would bring workers to talk to me, or even people would text me and I'd have meetings, is that a lot of things are known in different sectors, but they never get to the government. Or if they get there way late after they're completely entrenched. So I think that it's about being part of the community. For too long, the DA is sort of chosen when they get to be in the community and not in the community. And so I think it literally starts as basic as coming out, coming to meetings, talking to people, learning about what is happening, learning the trends, and then focusing our efforts that way. The other thing, as I said before, we can proactively do investigations, and we can do them in creative and innovative ways. We don't, you know, sometimes it is about going after someone for a document crime and letting that be the way in. And when people start to see the police officers are being held accountable, they'll be less afraid and they'll trust us, they'll come forward. That's a lot of how I built trust with the immigrant worker community and tenants and people that, you know, normally, as I said, really just never were comfortable coming to the DA's office. They would come and they would talk to me because I proved myself.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's also the end of our short 20 minutes, but I really appreciate the time and getting to know you. As I said before, we're trying to put together an official DA forum for some of the Lower Manhattan Democratic clubs, and we'll be in touch with you as soon as we finalize some of those dates. I also see my friend Richard Corman from DID, who's been, we were just on a call last week trying to nail down some of those details. So we hope to see you again, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say I've really enjoyed my time here. And if anyone has any follow-ups, please reach out to me. My website is diana4da.com. No misspelling of last name because it's very easy. And thank you so much. And I look forward to meeting with you all again. I hope someday in person. Wouldn't that be exciting?
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, indeed. All right.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
And for everybody else, if anybody